Hey there, you fabulous teachers. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of Teachers That Sparkle, where you get that little nugget of information that is going to make a huge difference in what you do each and every day in your classroom. I don't know if you follow me on Facebook, but I have a Facebook group called Teachers That Sparkle, and I spoke last Thursday. I go live in there every Thursday. And I spoke last Thursday about if I were to have power, which I don't, but if I were to be able to go in and design a school, specifically the curriculum itself, what would I do? And I spoke about the possibility of course, covering all of the academics, right? Our kids need to know the information, but incorporating some kind of process, program, procedures, something where kids get to apply that learning. I think education has gotten a pretty bad rap over the last years, and I think a lot of it is because people are leaving public education as adults, young adults, going out into the world and are not prepared for what the real world is requiring of them. I definitely can say this is true in the means of many, many years ago when I first became a principal. Well, I was about 3 years in. Harvard University started a new program and they partnered with Raise Your Hand Texas, which is actually run by the owner of all of the HEB stores in Texas. And what they decided to do is provide opportunities for 100 principals each year to be able to go to Harvard for the summer and study in regard to urban school leadership. And I was in the very first cohort that was chosen to go. They paid for everything. They even gave me money to eat. They paid for the lodging, the flights, everything. It was truly amazing. And then to be able to start study there in Boston at Harvard University, another item on my bucket list for sure. But the information that we were able to learn and then come back and apply in our own positions was priceless. It really was, because it made us look at things differently. And one of the things that we were able to take advantage of is then each year after we had gone, we had another conference, a yearly conference here in Texas for those of us that were in the cohorts. So we added, of course, to it every year and talk about things that are really real in the world right now, how education and the real world collide or mesh together. And during one of those conferences, the theme was preparing our children for the future. And so many businesses were there. So it was all educators, principals and above, and businesses. And we heard from all of these businesses that kids coming out of our Texas schools were very prepared to take a standardized test. Sound familiar? But not prepared to be able to do the real work that was needed, be able to write, be able to technically understand critical thinking and reading. And that was at a time where Texas was starting to adjust their assessments every year. But I can even speak about my own daughter. My daughter is like very high IQ, like border genius IQ. And she, it's just so funny because she can pass a standardized test like that. And when she left high school and went off to college, she struggled that first year because the workload of the critical thinking and the problem solving that was required in college didn't match what she was so good at in high school. She didn't have any struggles in high school, and she was just so amazing at all of her academics that then when she went to college and started struggling, it really affected her self-confidence and her drive. And she was already away from home, so you can kind of see where that's going. we have to be able to engage our students in the learning in a way that lets them apply the skills that they learn. Otherwise, they're just gaining a whole lot of information and they're never going to know what to do with it or how to utilize it to make their lives better. So after that conversation, and you can go to that Facebook group of mine. If you're not my friend on Facebook, you can request me and then I'll add you to the group. You can definitely see that live from last Thursday. However, I started to think over the weekend, I spoke a lot about engaging students, projects, and doing different things, and almost like an individual plan for every student. But then I wouldn't be a great teacher if I then didn't come back and say, okay, let's talk about what are some ways we can do this. Because if you're listening to this, you're probably an educator and you could be brand new. You could be 3 or 4 years in, you could be 20 years in, you could be in a place where your school or district mandates certain ways of doing things, and you've never done things that seem a little bit out of the box. So I want to take the next few weeks and talk about some really powerful engagement strategies for students that will not take a lot of extra effort for you to do, that they're pretty simple and you can incorporate them into the work that you do each and every day, no matter what your school or district mandates for you when you are writing your lessons and delivering your instruction. So, giving you that background, let's get started with this week's engagement strategy, which I call the jigsaw activity. This was brought to my attention Friday, which is so funny because I was at a workshop for business owners and we were actually learning Linktree. I didn't know anything about Linktree. I've never used it before, but wow, it's going to revolutionize my world. I can tell you that. However, in that workshop, we were talking about how powerful it was to be able to have opportunities to come together and learn. And within this group, we're starting to plan for a big event that'll take place later in the year, kind of like a retreat. And someone asked, could we all come that day, whoever signed up, come with something that we can teach each other? Well, the leader of our group and I have been talking about stuff like this, where it's more like a mastermind or a PLC or whatever you want to call it, right? So it was really, really I thought it was a great idea. And I said to the group, I've never thought about this because it's always been something that we do with teachers or students, but we do this all the time in schools. I said, we call it a jigsaw activity, and everybody brings a little something from whatever is happening and shares it out so that not everybody has to learn everything about everything, but that you can then take it in from somebody else, but you also have some expertise to share. And I was thinking about how we did this a lot with our teachers. Every year, I would do the handbook, start, the year with going over the handbook, and handbook is real boring, right? And it's not something that you want to get like, woo, all fired up with. So I would try different strategies to be able to talk about the handbook, but of course we have to talk about it. So a few times I did the jigsaw strategy where groups, grade levels, were assigned certain portions of the handbook, and then they had to learn them, read about it, learn them, internalize them, and then prepare some kind of way to teach it to the rest of the group. Some years we had lots of fun with that. Some years, of course, not so much. But I think a lot of it was whether they knew what to do, my staff, with it 100%. When they did, it made it much more engaging. So let's talk about that today with your students. Are there opportunities where you can take sometimes your lessons and be able to give your students portions that they have to learn in little groups or partners and then share out with the others? Now, as I was thinking this through, I was thinking about kindergarten and I was thinking about first grade, and I was thinking, could they do that? But then I was thinking, I think they probably could, because I do truly believe this. If you can teach a concept well, then you have internalized it and you know it, and it's showing that you can apply the skill. So let's just say that I'm going to use a couple of different examples, a first grade classroom, and it was science. And let's just say that we're learning about the weather. Could you divide your students up into 4 groups? So they're a little bit bigger groups, right? Maybe 5 or 6 in a group. And this group learns about summer, spring, winter, fall. So maybe not weather, but seasons. We'll change that up a little. And then they get to share what they learned with the rest of the class. And you as the teacher, you're still the guide on the side, right? They're the teachers, but you can then supplement any information that they may have missed in that process. You might not use it for how to decode words if you're a reading teacher in first grade, but you could use it for something in your science or social studies. Let's move on to maybe a 5th grade. Maybe in 5th grade, you could give your students different math problems if you're a math teacher. And you could say to them, okay, I want you to take this problem. So they're different skills, right? Maybe this is a review time. You take this problem and I want your group to be able to solve it 2 different ways, because that's always important, right? And then I want you to be able to teach it to the class. 1 problem, solve 2 ways, and teach it. How fun would that be for the kids? And if you're a student that's like, I don't know if I could do that, you're within a group. So your group is going to take care of you, right? It's not putting one person on the spot. Let's bump up into a secondary grade. Maybe you're in 8th or 9th grade. And now you're talking about something with history. We know history is super important when you get into those secondary levels. Not that it's not important in the elementaries, but most states have assessments and things about history or government or things like that. Could you break that down? Could you talk about the timeline of one of the different wars that took place? Or maybe you're talking about government and you want to have the groups talk about the different branches of government and what their responsibilities are, and then be able to present that to the rest of the group. It might sound like secondary students may not get excited about that, but what would be more fun for you? If you were sitting in a crowded library room or fine arts room or conference room or wherever it is that you have your staff development, and you're just sitting there and someone is just giving you information like this all day long, how are you going to feel about that? Are you really internalizing it? Are you doing anything with the information so that when you leave out, you ever really use the information again? Or what if you had opportunities to engage and apply that learning by doing something like this? And then you are able to get as creative as you want on how you present it with your group. And then that's the fun about still listening to the other groups so that you still get the information. And if there is some kind of accountability, right? So with your students, you can say, now, guys, all of this information is going to be important for your unit test or for your paper you're going to write or whatever it is, so that they have some kind of accountability for it. So think about that jigsaw activity. It might be awkward and a little cumbersome right at first, especially as you do it the first or second time, because you need to make sure that you teach it to your students and then have some trial and error. So maybe you do it with something real fun that's real simple, right? But I can promise you this. You could use it in so many different settings. It doesn't just have to be in the prime academic settings. It could be something in PE. It could be something in music. Could be something in art. So think outside the box, because the more kids engage with your learning, not only are they going to retain the learning, but it's also going to cut down on some of your behavior problems, because if they're having fun, they're not going to want to leave that classroom. They're not going to want to get in trouble and have to move away from the activity. All right, y'all, that is my tip for this week. And as I said, throughout the month of February, so in the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about different engagement strategies, just so that you can have a few more tools in your toolbox and get that one little piece of something that can help you be amazing in that classroom, working with your students and being the best teacher that you can be. I'm Sherry with Teachers That Sparkle. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you right back here next week for another fantastic episode.